Hello, Florence, my love. Are you ready for chapter 29? Here we go. Alaric was the only one outside when they came into camp. "Hey, the pig is back," he called. A limping sailor, hobbled on a wooden stick, came to the door of the snow cabin. Flora didn't like the way he looked at her. She would be keeping away from that one. Alaric put out 3 small frozen fish that Flora attacked. She looked up to see Sophia and Oscar watching. She felt a little ashamed, but still couldn't help licking the snow where the fish had been. It was her first meal in 3 days, and she felt almost as hungry as before. Alaric scratched behind her ears. "I wish I could give you more," he said. His fingers moved under her chin. "I never met an animal with better timing than you when it comes to killing rats and not getting killed yourself. You are one smart pig. Now, all we need to figure out is how you and the rest of us can stay alive until they come back." There's a picture. Alaric's giving her a scratch. Flora glanced at the sailor with the stick. Men and animals all slept in the snow shelter together now. The nights were getting colder. The snow shelter was smaller and kept the warmth better than the drafty cabin with the lifeboat as the roof. Most of the boxes were gone, along with the other dogs, so there was plenty of room. Alaric had made beds for the men by layering several blankets for padding. The captain spent all his time in his bed, for he was still weak and spoke very little. Flora decided she'd curl up against him at night to keep him warm. It was an easy job. Flora's knowledge about her role on the expedition was not the only thing that had changed during her time in the hole. She didn't feel the cold as she had before either. After those 2 days on her own, her body was able to handle the freezing temperatures. She could now stand being outside for several hours each day. She still kept up her trot around the camp, partly out of habit and partly so she'd be fit to run if the sailor ever got close. But the biggest change in Flora was that she no longer dreamed of dog sledding. She dreamed only about food. She was always hungry. One morning, Flora heard the sound of pounding. She gently pulled herself away from the captain's side and walked to the doorway. Alaric had found a hammer, saw, and nails. He was taking loose boards from wooden crates and making them into a box. Then he dragged the lifeboat over the top of the empty cabin and banged on it until it fell apart. He laid out 2 curved pieces from the front of the boat parallel to each other like sled runners. He placed straight boards across both runners, nailed them down tight, and then attached the wooden box he had made. "What does he think he's doing?" Sophia stepped up beside her. "It's a homemade sled," said Flora. They watched Alaric tie a rope to the front of the box. He made a loop in the free end. Then Flora heard the captain's voice calling. Alaric ducked past them into the snow shelter. In a few moments, he reappeared, pulling the captain on a blanket. The captain's eyes were brighter, and Flora thought he appeared to have regained some of his strength. Alaric helped him sit up with his back against the wall of the shelter so he could see. But it was Oscar who took the most interest in the project. After so many days of rest, he seemed to be feeling much better. He sniffed the loop at the front of the sled, walked around the whole thing, and then stayed close to Alaric's side, even getting underfoot at times, especially when Alaric bent to pick up the loop. A spark of Flora's old feelings flickered to life. She tried not to remember. She tried not to feel. "Stop it," she told herself. But her desire to run with a team, to come through when everyone was counting on her, maybe even have a crack at leading the pack, wouldn't go away. The truth was Flora wanted to walk, no, dance, around the whole sled herself. Fiercely, she pushed away these thoughts. She crawled back into the snow shelter, into the darkest corner, and spent the rest of the day alone. But that night, in her dreams, she flew high above the earth in a moonless sky. Behind her, like a falling star, sailed a silver sled. Chapter 30. That sled you're building is more than just a toy, isn't it? It was the captain's voice. Alaric and the two men were sitting on their beds. Flora looked around. Where were Oscar and Sophia? She inched toward the door. I hate being hungry all the time, and if the others don't make it back... Alaric had a hammer in his hand. He began scraping at the floor of the snow shelter with the claw end, but then stopped and tamped the loose snow back in place. You said there was a food station 3 days out and that it's not needed now for the expedition. I'd like to find it and bring the supplies back. Well, by now you probably know how to use the sun and stars to navigate from watching the crew, the captain said. And of course the dog has already been there. These sled dogs have an amazing ability to remember their way back to a place they've already visited, and Oscar is one of the best. But even for me, with all my experience, it's extremely dangerous, even reckless, to head into an inhospitable terrain alone. Besides, I'm not convinced the dog is well enough to pull. It'll be a heavy load when the supplies are added. But Oscar looks almost like his old self. Alaric thumped the side of the boat of his boot with a hammer. The captain hesitated. Let's discuss this again in a few days. My health has been improving steadily. I should be the one to make the journey. Flora shook her head. Oscar was looking much better, but he was hardly back to his old self, and the captain would be lucky if he could even stand without help in a few days. We don't need more food. The sailor poked his stick in the snowy floor. We don't. Why don't we just eat the pig? How dare you? Flora felt the hairs on her neck stand up. She measured the distance to the door. She could make a run for it if the sailor got any ideas about jumping on her. That pig saved my life. It was the captain. Well, it could save your life again, Captain, and I know just the recipe. The captain didn't answer. Flora slipped out and walked until the camp was barely visible. She wished she could keep walking. She was so tired of being afraid. Later that morning, the captain was dragged out to this place against the shelter. Tell me if you see something that will make this thing glide better, Alaric said to him. Then, looping the rope over his neck and under one shoulder, he gave the new sled a pull. Oscar followed, woofing. When Alaric didn't stop, Oscar ran in front and almost tripped the boy until Alaric took the loop off and placed it around Oscar. The big dog now walked like a king, pulling the sled with his head high. About 10 steps later, the loop slipped off his chest and down to the snow. Aw, look at he looks so happy to be pulling that sled again. Oscar picked it up in his teeth and dragged the sled another few steps, making everyone laugh. Flora couldn't help but smile too. I already feel better, already. Oscar flopped down beside her. He looked better, although he was breathing hard. Pulling is like medicine, Flora finished. I know, you told me already. Yup, said Oscar, and I've been needing a dose of that medicine for a long time. After a quick rest, Alaric brought out a second rope. Flora's heart jumped, but he tied the new rope to the sled and made a loop for himself. He adjusted Oscar's rope so it wouldn't slip off. Together, they pulled the sled in a tight circle as a team. Flora couldn't stand it any longer. She trudged away again, this time far into the white, until the sounds from camp faded. She looked all around. It was so strange to feel trapped in the middle of so much open space, but that was exactly how she felt. When she finally followed her tracks back, the sled was gone, and so was everyone else except for the captain. He had fallen asleep sitting up. Flora lay down by his side. They both woke to a loud whooping. The sled seemed to be returning from a trial run. Sophia hopped off as soon as they came to a stop and batted playfully at Oscar, who was pulling the sled by himself. Alaric had made him a sort of harness out of smaller ropes. Oscar looked tired but happy. Alaric helped the sailor stand up from where he had been sitting at the bottom of the box and then unhooked Oscar. Sir, Alaric walked up to the captain and saluted. We've practiced with extra weight in the sled. A full-grown man plus me, and the dog did fine. I know you wanted more time to consider, but we don't have time. I'd like permission to go out in search of the food stores. The captain looked at his boots. Oscar joined the boy, and Alaric leaned down and patted him on the ribs. I have the strength to help Oscar pull if need be, but I'm not getting any stronger on the little bit of food we have each day. The captain shook his head. My mind is made up. It's no job for a boy alone. We'll devise a plan in a few days. Alaric crossed his arms. He looked bigger and more confident than the boy Flora had first met that day on the dock. I know I'm only a cabin boy, but you were the one who said you would never know where brains and talent will come from. It might be time to find out. No, the captain's voice was kind but firm. Permission denied. I would be sending you to your doom. Yes, sir. Flora was surprised at how easily Alaric seemed to give up. The boy looked around at the fading light. It's time to get inside, sir, and have a bite. It's too cold for you out here. Alaric covered the captain's legs with the blanket and gently pulled him into the snow shelter. After Alaric dished out the evening meal, he tucked more blankets around the captain while everyone got ready for bed. Flora lay down again at the captain's side. Keep him warm, pig, said Alaric. Flora woke in the middle of the night. She listened for the sound that had awakened her, but all was silent. She raised her nose to sniff the air and then cocked her head and listened again. The captain was breathing slow and steady. The sailor was snoring loudly, but something was different. Alaric and Oscar were missing, and so was Sophia. Flora stepped outside quietly so as not to wake everyone. She looked around in the half-light. The sled was gone, but the runners had made clear marks in the snow, disappearing in a straight line into the great wilderness. Flora knew this was no practice run. No matter what the captain had said, Alaric and Oscar and Sophia were off on their brave quest, and they had left Flora behind. That's the end of chapter 30. Kisses to you. 3 more for your family. I love you.